This is the Scuba Educational Alliance Ocean Podcast, Episode 8. The Scuba Educational Alliance Ocean Podcast is a bi-weekly podcast dedicated to the world of scuba diving, ocean health, sustainability, and fostering a new generation of ocean stewards through diving education. Happy holidays, everyone, and thank you for tuning into this latest episode. I'm Jeff Centropino, founder and president of the Scuba Educational Alliance of Connecticut. Well, here we are, the day after Christmas, and less than a week away from the start of the new year. I trust that you had a very Merry Christmas and are preparing to flip the calendar. So the big game, Army-Navy, ended up being a very big win for Navy. Like I said, you can throw the records out for this game. There is nothing bigger at the academies than winning this game. Great job, Blue and Gold, and yes, there is still a football team in Annapolis, regardless of what the Army coach says. This is the time of year that many of us start to lay out our plans for the upcoming year, and I'm working on my goals and objectives for 2025. We have a few things scheduled right now and hope to lock in some other activities. I'll give you an update on that after the first of the year. But on today's show, however, I want to take a look back at 2024, a year of change. But up first is C-State, News and Information Update. This is C-State here on the Scuba Educational Alliance Ocean Podcast for Thursday, December 26th, 2024. Well, let's start out this installment with a bit of bad news. This coming from an Oceana press release earlier this month. Coca Cola has doubled down on using single-use plastic. Now, this announcement came on the heels of the failure of the UN to negotiate a plastic treaty. The Oceana statement indicated that Coke is effectively ending its goal to increase reusable packaging and to reduce virgin plastic use. Instead, Coca-Cola has indicated that by 2035, they seek to increase recycled plastic use by 30 to 35% and to quote-unquote help to ensure the collection of 70 to 75% of the equivalent numbers of bottles and cans produced annually. Oceana minced no words, saying this is short-sighted, irresponsible, and worthy of widespread condemnation by its customers, its employees, its investors, and government. If you are concerned about plastic pollution, then this decision by Coca-Cola is just not good news right now. And while we are discussing disappointing news, here's some more. Now, when I was doing Scuba Shack Radio, I did a segment on an initiative that DEMA is sponsoring called the Dive Boat Act. That stands for Don't Imperil Vessel Employees, Boat Operators, and Tourists. The legislation is desperately needed to address the impacts of the Small Passenger Vessel Act, which targeted dive boats, and that was a result of the Concepcion fire. Now, DEMA has long lobbied for a fix, and there was strong hope that this would be included in the Coast Guard Reauthorization Act. That's part of the 2025 National Defense Authorization Act. Late in the game, however, the Dive Boat Act was pulled from the legislation. Now, the work will continue with this new Congress, and that has different leadership that is more inclined to support the fix, as well as there is now support from the Passenger Vessel Association, who finally realized the original legislation does, in fact, impact their members. DEMA's lobby and efforts will continue, and while the failure in 2024 is a setback, there is strong belief that this will get done in 2025. Well, let's shift gears and talk about something really interesting on the clean energy front. I say interesting because this would take a lot of work to actually use. Now, this story comes from the BBC Science Forum magazine. The article is by Noah Leach with the headline, Massive New Energy Source Discovered Hiding Under Earth's Surface. Well, this new source is a vast reserve of hydrogen energy. Now, hydrogen is formed naturally by geochemical processes. Until now, the only reserves were thought to be in Albania and Mali. But there is a new study that suggests the hydrogen reserves actually stretch around the world. Just how much energy this could support? Some estimates say it's only about 2%. But a lot, not a lot, but more than other sources. While this energy source is good news, it is not without challenges, specifically on developing the infrastructure to extract the hydrogen, not to mention on finding the best place to get it. Like I said, this is some good news, but we already have other proven technologies like wind and sun that are readily available. Now, here's an interesting story that I came across on NBC News, and it's about a humpback whale that has made a record-breaking migration. Now, this specific whale has stunned scientists by going on an 8,000-mile migration covering 3 oceans. Now, they're trying to figure out why the whale did this. Although humpback whales are known for their long migrations, this one far surpassed the usual. Was this migration because of climate change or a shift in mating strategy? They don't know. Now, this humpback whale was first spotted in 2013 off the Pacific coast of Colombia, and then again spotted in 2017 in the same general area. But in 2022, the whale showed up off the coast of Zanzibar. Zanzibar is in the Indian Ocean, 22 miles east of Central Africa. If you take a look at the world map, that is a really long journey. So as we continue to get more data from citizen scientists who report into databases like happywhale.com, the question out there is whether we are just now uncovering natural migrations like this one, or if this is a specific record-breaking migration suggests a shift due to other circumstances. There was an article on Deeper Blue recently by Sam Helmy about a new method of transplanting corals, or at least restoring the reefs. The method is called a coral reef ecosystem transplant. Here's how it works. Scientists are taking a biometric terracotta tile and embedding it with a range of organisms ranging from microorganisms to invertebrates, and then they plant the tile onto the reef. And what they've found is that the coral from the damaged reef seem to latch onto the tile and begin to recover. Now, the work is being headed by Dr. Natalie Levy, the lead researcher from Bar Ilan University's Mina and Everon Goodman Faculty of Life Science. Bar Ilan University is located in Israel. Now, there is promise that this transplant process will build towards more resilient, sustainable coral ecosystems that are facing thermal decline. The entire study can be found at nature.com. You just search for coral ecosystem transplant. The study was published on November 19th, 2024. So this is a bit of good news for coral reef restoration. And finally, here is something interesting from the Divers Alert Network December Safety Stop newsletter. There is a short blog article regarding carbon monoxide or CO detection tools. Now, I am familiar with the CO analyzers that are on the market, and they mention one in particular, the FD-108-CO analyzer from Forensic Detectors. While not overly expensive, I saw it online for about $99. But remember, you still need to factor in the idea of replacing the sensor from time to time. But there was another option that I hadn't heard of before, a disposable single-use CO detector. It comes from Safety Labs Plus Incorporated. I believe they're out of Florida. Now, it comes in a small foil pouch, and inside is a balloon, small indicating disc, and instructions. The website says you can use the package to test multiple tanks throughout the day or until carbon monoxide is detected. They have a 2-minute video on how to use the detector. Essentially, you put the disc into this balloon, fill the balloon from the tank, and wait 5 to 10 minutes. If the disc turns black, you've got a problem. The kits are not expensive at $8.95, and you can order them from their website at co-pro.com. Well, that's it for this installment of Sea State here on the Scuba Educational Alliance Ocean Podcast. As we come to the end of 2024, it's time to take a few minutes to look back at the year. The U.S. presidential election certainly dominated our news cycle here, and the results will most definitely signal a change. But 2024 was also a year of some dramatic changes for me personally as well. Now, 2023 was a record year for us at the dive shop. We had our best year since taking over the business. Now, there were many reasons for that. The pandemic years, as I like to call them, 2020 to 2022, were in the rearview mirror for the most part. And I think there was a lot of pent-up demand released in 2023. So there was a lot of folks who wanted to get into scuba diving, and with supply chains finally settling out, gear sales were strong. And finally, people wanted to travel, and we had some outstanding dive trips in 2023. As we moved into 2024, something felt a little different. More on that in a moment. Normally, our first dive trip of the year is in late February or early March. But in 2024, we scheduled our first trip for the end of January. And there were some expiring incentives with Little Cayman resorts that we had to use, so we decided to head to Little Cayman. Now, traveling this early in the year can present challenges from the Northeast, and while we didn't have any issues getting to the Caymans, we did encounter several days of bad weather with very high winds on Little Cayman, and that forced the cancellation of 2 days of diving. Now, Little Cayman is a fantastic place to go diving, but if you're stuck on land, it's pretty small with not a lot to do. And we tried to make up the dives with additional afternoon dives, but still came up short of our planned dives. The weather will be what it will be, and contrary to what some folks have said, we really can't control it. Once we got back from Little Cayman, and after I had all the year-end financial work finished up, Donna and I realized that we were ready to move on. Now, our initial plan was to run the dive shop through 2025. As I mentioned, 2023 was very busy and exhausting. And as we looked ahead, we both realized that we didn't feel up to the physical challenges of the day-to-day operations of the shop. By the end of February, our decision was made to exit the business in 2024. How we would do that still needed to be resolved. We would either sell the shop or shut it down by year end. Fortunately, our partner Monty put together a team that was willing to take over the operation. Now, when you get involved in selling or buying a business, there's a lot of back and forth and negotiations that go on. It took us about 4.5 months, but by the third week of July, we had a deal in place and settled on the sale July 31st. I call this my retirement part 2, as I had already retired from my corporate job in 2021. Now, over the next several weeks, Donna and I would be involved in transition activities that we negotiated into the agreement. Plus, we had our trip to the Sea of Cortez lined up for mid-August. That proved to be a spectacular trip. Sea lions, giant jawfish, octopus, and so much more. If you've never been to the Sea of Cortez, you should definitely put it on your list. Now, in January 2024, William Klein launched a new Scuba Industry Magazine, aptly titled Scuba Diving Industry Magazine. Now, I know William from the DEMA board, and I reached out to him about having an article in the February edition. Well, let's just say that it turned out to be a new gig for me. One of the articles that William asked me to write about was how to start a podcast to support your dive shop, and that was because of my work with Scuba Shack Radio. Turns out that my article inspired him to start the Level Up podcast supporting his magazine. Each month, the authors get together on a Zoom call hosted by Greg Holt from Scuba Radio that is published as a podcast. Now, I've had the good fortune of participating in most of these shows this year, and it's great to get together and network with many leaders in the dive community. With the sale of the shop, I decided that it was time to end Scuba Shack Radio. The podcast started in 2019 to support the dive shop, and after 142 bi-weekly episodes, it seemed like the right time to wrap up the podcast. But I just couldn't stop there, and here we are with this podcast. Back in 2022, I started a nonprofit called Scuba Educational Alliance of Connecticut with the goal of creating a new generation of ocean stewards by getting young people into scuba. This has been a journey of highs and lows. Let's just say in 2024, I needed to take a step back and reset the approach. We did, however, have a very successful Earth Day coral reef conservation course for 23 high school students, but we were unfortunately unable to offer any scuba training. It was a bummer, but now being retired from the dive shop, I vow to refocus and have come up with a workable plan for 2025, and I'm pleased with what's on the horizon. One of my goals in 2024 was to read more. I did do a couple of segments on Scuba Shack Radio on my reading list. I like to alternate between fiction and nonfiction. This year, my nonfiction focused on extinction. Extinction of businesses like Blockbuster and BlackBerry, and extinction of species like the passenger pigeon. My fiction list centered around Clive Cussler's Dirk Pitt series, and I started a new series under the Cussler banner, Sam and Remy Fargo Adventures. Stay tuned for my 2025 list. So after finishing up our transition at the dive shop, Donna and I still have one more dive trip for the year. We would be heading down to Cayman Brac. We hadn't been there for a very long time, and we were really looking forward to getting back. You can listen to the trip report on episode 4 of this podcast. And finally this year, it was time to head out to Las Vegas for DEMA Show 2024. Wow, lots of fun as we got to meet with a lot of folks, talk diving, and get some great sightseeing in. The DEMA recap is detailed in episode 6 if you haven't listened already. So as I reflect on 2024 and the goals that I set out for the year, I have to say that things went pretty much according to plan. Yeah, some things didn't get finished, but there's always next year, and that starts in less than a week. There's a lot in store for the new year, and maybe next time we'll take a look at the year ahead. So as we wrap up 2024, I want to wish you a happy new year as we get ready to flip the calendar over to 2025 and get ready for all that lies ahead next year. I also want to thank you for listening to the show and ask that you please subscribe to stay up to date. Let's see what this new year brings. Bye for now. This has been the Scuba Educational Alliance Ocean Podcast, a show dedicated to the world of scuba diving, ocean health, sustainability, and fostering a new generation of ocean stewards through diving education. Talk to you again real soon.